I don't think so. I'm churning out a few late winners here. Barry Connell and Snake Oil is getting me back in the game.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. Today we are going to preview the Aintree 2022 Grand National Festival. 3 days of top class action. And I'm joined alongside Andrew Blair White. Andrew, how are you doing?
Yeah, brilliant, Josh. It's been obviously a few weeks leading up to Aintree since Cheltenham. We obviously had the Scottish National last week, which was a nice appetizer, but moving through this, then we've got Fairyhouse next week, Punchestown only in a couple of weeks' time as well, and certainly as Jumps fans we have to cling on to these days, because these flat days, I just look at the flat race, I don't know whether you look at it, and just go like, how are people finding enjoyment out of this? Like, I backed one horse at Leopardstown last Saturday, it got trapped wide, came around 12 round the bend and finished 6th in a 5-place race. And I just went, why?
It's one of those where I think people have asked for us to make a few videos about the flat, and if we're being honest, would you watch Jamie Oliver commentate over football? No, because he simply doesn't really like it or enjoy it, and he likes his food, and you go and watch Jamie Oliver cook. The passion's not there on my side, so the plan firmly is to prepare for next winter. The winter is coming. We really enjoyed the 4 to Follow series, and I think someone over here is the champion of that one. We're not going to mention it too much.
I don't think so. I'm churning out a few late winners here. Barry Connell and Snake Oil is getting me back in the game.
For the next video, we will go through the results of that, and you will see. But before, we do have a couple of festivals to get through. We've got Punchestown, Fairyhouse as well, and then we also have Aintree, and Aintree is a big week. Maybe a little bit of an afterthought after Cheltenham. I'm not sure it should be that, but it seems to be that way. Paul Nicholls, Dan Skelton are the only two major English trainers that kind of skip Cheltenham with a few of the high-profile horses and go here. That might be beneficial. It was very beneficial for Paul Nicholls last year with the likes of Clan des Obeaux, Mon Miral. Hopefully we can find some winners. We will be previewing every single Grade 1 of the 3-day meeting, and then at the end of each day we'll have a nap and a next best, which might come in a Grade 1 but could also come in the handicaps or the bumper, for instance. But let's get on to it. Let's not spend too much time talking about it without really focusing in on the first race, the 2 mile 4 furlongs Grade 1 novice chase. Grade 1. If this field turned up to the Pendle, I'd be disappointed.
Yeah, it's not one of the great races. I suspect if you were being nice about it, you'd say it's a competitive race. I think that's the way to maybe put it. It's not a vintage Grade 1 renewal. Look, it was never going to be. There was only 4 runners in the Turners at Cheltenham, and all 4 of them were Irish runners. So the 2.5 mile novice chase division hasn't been very strong in England. It was made much weaker by My Drogo. Obviously getting ruled out for the season earlier in the year. You'd have thought he'd have rocked up to this race and been around 1 to 3 based off what he did at Aintree last year. For me, it's not a race I'd have a massive play on. I've come down on Warlord. I just think he might be the best of a relatively average lot here. He's had a pretty decent season. The only 2 times he's been beaten this year have been by Edwardstone. He ran a respectable race in the Arkle. Going up in trip might help him as well. He's 11 to 4. He was my angle into the race, just because I think Pictori's a little bit, well, he's just a bit of a loon, really. You don't know what Pictori's going to turn up, and the rest of them don't inspire great confidence in me. So Warlord for me, but it's probably a tentative enough selection.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong selection either. I would just about go with Miller's Bank at 7 to 1 each way. He was very impressive on his first start over fences and then was unseated twice. He wasn't going to win the first time. Pictori was going to win that day, but the second time he was going well, and he had a confidence building run and finished a close second to Pictori the last day. But what I'm going back to is the Aintree hurdle last year where he finished 3rd, and he was only beaten 3 lengths by Abacadabras. I think that form could potentially be the best form on offer. I know it wasn't over fences, but if he can translate that to this year. I think it'd be difficult to beat, and at 7-1. The next race is the 2 mile Grade 1 juvenile race, and we've got Pied Piper who's going to run versus the Boodles winner in Brazil. I wanted to take a little look into this. So the question is, can Brazil beat Pied Piper? And we're going to show Brazil's victory when beating Gaelic Warrior in the Boodles at the Cheltenham Festival. And as you can see here, it was very slow in the early stages of the race. You've got the likes of Too Friendly, Saint Segal, Champion Green, all very keen. Maybe Champion Green, you would expect that, but Too Friendly and Saint Segal have been all right in their races prior, but they were going slow in the early stages. We're coming up now to the second flight, and this is vital to watch, because Gaelic Warrior jolts and jumps out to his right, and it squeezes Dr. Brown Bear, who's on the inside of him, and Forever William, who's on the wide outside, and they squeeze Brazil in, which sandwiches him, interferes with him, and he loses 4 or 5 lengths and track position, which forced him to, when they go out into the country, that he had to go widest of them all. But as you can see here, I think this is interesting. He quickly makes up the ground. For many juveniles, that exertion in the mid part of a race could hinder the application in the finish, but he definitely did a bit of running there. Now, Gaelic Warrior, coming down to the 4th last, jumps out to his right. Brazil's on the wrong side. The 3rd last is the same. Brazil's on the wrong side. But the 2nd last, it's very, very, very severe. Gaelic Warrior jumps right out to his right. Brazil is then pushed really wide. And at this point, I think Mark Walsh knows he's got to get on the inside. Instantly, when the gap opens and they come around the bend, has no option but to get on the inside. He can't afford Gaelic Warrior to jump right again. We then come up to the last, and Gaelic Warrior does jump out to his right. Brazil jumps it straight. Gaelic Warrior, I think, is way above average, but the fact that Brazil had the stamina to get to Gaelic Warrior in the end, I think will prove to be a very good performance. So with all of that, I definitely think you can upgrade the performance. So with all that to cope with, he still managed to get the job done. Pied Piper, as much as he was 3rd in the Triumph hurdle, and it was a good run, I almost think that Aintree might suit him more, given his flat background.
Yeah, potentially so. And to answer your question, I do think Brazil can step up. I don't think he's a price to be backing at the moment. I think everyone's kind of cottoned on to it, really. And if I'm being brutally honest, it's probably a no-bet race at the moment, with Pied Piper being a shade of odds on and Brazil being kind of into now 7-4, 15-8 in places. It's not a overly brilliant price. I don't know about Pied Piper. I find it quite hard. I'm a big fan of Vauban. I'm a big fan of Phil Dorr, and he was bang there. So off that and off his previous runs as well, you'd think he would still have to take a lot of the beating, and probably if pinned to the wall, he'd be the one you'd have to side with. But I think Brazil will run very well, and he probably mightn't, he might appreciate a spot of rain if it was to come over an Aintree, because he does seem to like a little bit of softer ground. He won at Naas very impressively on soft ground 2 starts back, and as you say, he overcome a lot to win the Boodles. So he's obviously a very good horse. I think the two of them are quite well clear of the English challenge in this, and wouldn't surprise me if they were a little bit clear.
And the next race is the 3 miles and 1 furlong Betway Bowl Grade 1, and Clanderzobo's in there. We've got Protectorate and a few others that ran in the Gold Cup or over the Cheltenham Festival. One that has been saved was Kenboy. I think he's quite interesting at 5-1. It wouldn't surprise me if this was potentially his last ever run. He's clearly been on the decline for a couple of years, and he's ran well in snatches. I actually think that if he was to repeat the 3rd behind Galvin and Aplutar over Christmas at Leopardstown, it puts him bang there. He's the same age as Clanderzobo. He beat him in 2019 to win this race on his only start at Aintree. I am banking that Protectorate had a hard race at Cheltenham and Conflated fell, and that might take a bit of a knock, but I'm willing to give Kenboy a go at the prices. I think that he does have one last hurrah in him.
Yeah, I've a real strong fancy in Kenboy in this. I think he's got a fantastic chance. I just like the way he's missed Cheltenham. You've had horses, as you say, Protectorate. I thought he ran fantastically in the Gold Cup. He ran above how I thought he would, but you'd have to think he's had a hard enough race. Conflated has ended up on the deck when just being asked for his effort in the Ryanair. So hard to know what that would have taken out of him. He does have natural ability, but Kenboy, it's just the way he won in 2019 under Ruby Walsh. He was electric around Aintree, and I was very surprised they probably didn't go there last year with the horse. They opted to go to Punchestown straight after Cheltenham, which didn't seem to work. They obviously didn't go back to Cheltenham this year. He doesn't like it there, and as you say, he's just on his best form. which I still think there's shreds of evidence to suggest there could be. I think 5 to 1, 11 to 2 could be a cracking price.
The next race is the 2.5 mile Aintree hurdle, a Grade 1, and we've got Zanna here, who finished third in the champion hurdle, going up against Epatante, who finished second. But over 4 furlongs further, there's obviously the likes of Brewing Up a Storm in behind as well. Who do you fancy here?
Yeah, hard race. I find it hard to split the top two in the market. Obviously, Zanna here's looked like he's been crying out for 2.5 miles all year. He finally gets it. That being said, he's had a tough enough year. He's constantly running in Grade 1s. Again, a little bit like Protectorat. I know it's a completely different type of race, being a 2 mile hurdle, but you'd have to just wonder what it's taken out of Epatante and Zanna here. And I just think at those prices, I'd almost let either of them win. I would probably prefer Zanna here ever so slightly, just because I have been saying he wants that step up in trip. I think the play in this, in the 3-place markets that Ladbrokes and Coral are paying out, is Monmoral. I'm going to stick true to him. He was a horse I really liked last year for obviously the juvenile race where he thrashed Adagio. And it just seems to be, obviously he didn't go right in the Fighting Fifth. The National Spirit Hurdle, I thought he ran with an awful lot of zest, an awful lot of, good positives to take out of that, and then just blew up. And Nicholls' horses weren't running great at the time, and I think they've always earmarked that this was going to be the place they were going to come to. Now, people may say to me he hasn't probably proven himself at Open Grade 1 company, and he hasn't, but at the same stage, Nicholls has a very good record at this meeting usually, and you can get 8, 9 to 1 each way for 3 places, even though it's a 7-runner race, and I think that might be the play.
I'd much prefer him than Brewing Up a Storm, and I'm a big fan of Brewing Up a Storm, but if I look through his profile, he's never beating a true Grade 1 horse. McFabulous isn't a true Grade 1 animal, and that potentially could be his biggest scalp. Epatante would have doubts with her staying, although a flat track and quick ground would help. I'm just going to go with Zanna here. I think he's a stayer. He's going to be a 3-miler down the line over fences. There's not been a race yet, this season anyway, that's been made for him, but I do think this one is. Now let's quickly talk about a nap and a next best for the Thursday. What's yours?
Yeah, well, my nap is Kenboy. I really, really like him actually for the Betway Bowl, and my next best comes in the Fox Hunters race over the national fences, should I say, and it's last year's Fox Hunters winner actually, Porlock Bay. I think he's got a great chance in this. He's around 9, 10 to 1 for Will Biddick. He missed Cheltenham this time round because they think he's probably a little bit better over this interim trip, which is probably right. I think he's got a very good chance if he jumps round. Obviously these races can sometimes be carnage, but I think he's got a very good chance, and 9 to 1's probably a little bit over what he should be.
My nap is Frero Bamboo for Venetia Williams in the 2 miles handicap chase. My next best would be a mare for Milton Harris, a filly for Milton Harris, in the bumper, and it's Rosie Redrum at 6 to 1. I think she goes there with a massive chance. She skipped Cheltenham. Milton loved her for that race. I think this race is clearly weaker. I don't think it's a vintage renewal at all, and I think Rosie Redrum around Aintree could be absolutely made for her. And if you look back at her Newbury run the last day, where she finished second to Top Dog, who was a very good horse in his own right and a very smart prospect novice hurdling next year, Top Dog kind of kicked on early, took a few lengths out of the field, and she was closing all the while. So I think that was a very eye-catching run. She's only young. She gets the 4-year-old allowance as well against the other mares. It's not as much as if she was going to go up against a gelding, but I still think she goes there with a big chance. A 6 to 1 Rosie Redrum to run well in the bumper. Let's follow on then to the 2 mile novice hurdle on the Friday, the opening contest. And John Bon is, the last time I heard, he's definitely going to run here. I tried to check it today. He's been on the drift for a while. If he does, we'll take it he does run here. John Bon, El Fabiolo, who we've only seen once for Willie Mullins, but it was very, very good, and you were clearly a massive fan of his. Do you think El Fabiolo has it in him to beat a horse like John Bon, or do you just see this as a penalty kick for the Nicky Henderson horse?
Yeah, very hard to assess El Fabiolo. I must confess, when I initially was ranting on about him, I thought he might be this year's state man. That he was going to be that unexposed horse that would go into a handicap hurdle and maybe end up being a graded horse in time. It's a big ask going up against John Bon, and just with the way the prices are at the moment, now that might be indicative of the fact that John Bon's not going to run, but I think John Bon's now 5 to 4 in comparison to El Fabiolo being around 7 to 4, 15 to 8 at time of recording, and based off those prices, geez, I'd be backing John Bon every single day here. I think a track like Aintree is probably going to suit him a little bit more than Cheltenham. He still ran a grand race around Cheltenham, but he's got a lot of speed. He jumps slick. I still really like him. He hasn't been dented in my estimations whatsoever, even though he was beaten 20 lengths in the Supreme. He still ran a very creditable race, given the circumstances. And if he's out, and if he comes out and is, fit and firing after that, I think he'll win. And you look at the rest of them, El Fabiolo, but like the next in the market is First Street and Colonel Mustard. Horses that couldn't win the county hurdle. Like, I'd like to hope John Bond's better than that.
The next race is, in my opinion, one of the races of the meeting, and it's the 3 miles and 1 furlong Grade 1 Novice Chase. And the favourite is Brave Man's Game. The second favourite is La Homme Presse, and the third favourite is Ahoy Senor. The fourth favourite, even Fury Road, who could run here. I'm very, very curious to know who you'll be siding with in this.
Yeah, I've been tossing and turning over this race many times over the last few days. I can't get my head around it. I don't think the market's correct. I think La Homme Presse, whether you want to back him or not, La Homme Presse should be favourite in this race. I don't see why Brave Man's Game is favourite, personally speaking. I think it's just a little bit of this kind of idea that, he didn't run, so therefore he kind of must be, fresher and better and stuff like that. And I just don't quite buy into that. That being said, he's just the type of horse that you feel will just suit Aintree so well. Like, he just feels, for me, like another Clan des Obeaux, and we're just going to see him rock around Kempton and Aintree and these tracks, and he's just going to be absolutely different mustard. And the fact he didn't run at Cheltenham was probably a wise decision. I think he'd have pulled up in that ground. I don't think he would have gone a yard. Then we've got my friend Ahoy Senor, a headbutter of fences, but clearly a massive engine. And he's 9-2. It's a short enough price, probably against two horses that have beaten him comprehensively. So I've twisted and turned. I think La Homme Presse is the best of the three.
Oh, there we go. La Homme Presse. I think La Homme Presse, although it didn't look like it visually, I think he had a hard race. That race is gruelling and conditions were horrific that day. I actually just think Brave Man's Game's a better horse than La Homme Presse. Might be controversial. Brave Man's Game's a better jumper.
Oh. It's hard to say he's a better jumper than La Homme Presse.
I don't think it is at all. I think he's the best novice chaser in jumping-wise in training.
Yeah, well, La Homme Presse is a good jumper now. He's a better jumper than Ahoy Senor, but probably I'm a better jumper than him. So
I think around Aintree, a flat track, I wouldn't want the weather to go south. If it was good to soft, good ground, I'd have no problem with them staying around there. Maybe 3 miles at Cheltenham might be another question. I think it's going to take some stopping in this race, in the King George, and like you say, in those flat tracks. And annoyingly, the first time we're going to see him over fences around Cheltenham is going to probably be in the Gold Cup. The next race is the 2.5 mile Melling Chase, the Grade 1. Who do you fancy here?
Well, I didn't think these words would ever come out of my mouth, but I am all over Fakir Dudery in this race. Can't believe he's not odds on, really. I think he's by far the best horse in these conditions. 11-8, I'd be getting on.
I'm going to take him on.
With who?
With a horse that didn't run at Cheltenham, Hitman, at 10-1. I'm going to take him on with... Why shouldn't I take him on with Hitman? You talk to me first.
No, I'll allow Brave Man's Game. There's actually logic behind your decisions there. But Hitman couldn't win a very average manifesto last year at Aintree. Fakir Dudery hasn't even come and had a hard race at Cheltenham. He's just gone straight from Ascot. And is clearly the second best 2.5 mile Grade 1 horse in training. And Hitman I would have down as being the 7th 2.5 best 2.5 mile Grade 1 horse in training. I'd have Janadale ahead of him, I'd have Conflated ahead of him, I'd have Funambul's Civila ahead of him. Like, I'd almost have First Flow ahead of him.
I disagree. He's only 6. He's been looked after because Paul Nicholls thinks his horse is a King George horse down the line. I've got no problem with him staying. Last year he hit the front, was a bit of a monkey and did stop, but he was beaten by Protectorate, and as much as you might not be the biggest fan of Protectorate, he finished 3rd in the Gold Cup. It was a mammoth run, and he's proven himself to be a seriously good horse.
He gave the nose ahead of the shunter, though, who didn't jump a twig all the way around. Look at the race back. The shunter, I think there's 16 fences in the manifesto. The shunter made 15 mistakes.
I am not going to change my opinion because you don't think he's going to win. I don't think you realise. He's 10-1. I think that represents value, and I would rather back Hitman at 10-1 because I think he will finish in the 3 than Fakir Dudery at 11-8 or whatever price he is.
No, I agree with that logic, and I agree with taking a 10-1 shot ahead of a short price horse, because I've done the same with Monmoral. The only thing I will say to you, Josh, is, like, how many horses is Paul Nicholls going to run in the King George in 2 years' time? You're telling me all of them are running there.
This year he had Clanderzoba, he had Frodon, he had St Calvados, he had 3 there. He's going to run 3 in next year's King George, 3 in the next one. That's just what he does. It's Paul Nicholls. He loves the King George, and leave him be. A horse that I actually think could be a King George horse down the line, I'm going to back in the Sefton, and that is Gelino Bello. That's at 11-1. Now, he might not have the class of a King George down the line. That might be an over-exaggeration, but he'll win a Badge of Beers. Don't deny me that. The moment he crossed the line at Aintree in October, I thought this horse is absolutely made for the Sefton. He then finished second twice to Blazing Carl, who didn't make the Albert Bartlett, but they were good runs over 3 miles and 2.5 at Cheltenham. I just think flat track, up in trip, this isn't the strongest race in the world. The Nicky Henderson horse Walking on Air is going to run in a 2.5 mile race, and I do know that Gelino Bello will run a solid 8-9 out of 10. And if there's a superstar in there, he'll get beat, but I don't think there is.
The old phrase of, broken clock is right twice a day or something like that. We usually write out best bets for these podcasts. I have 4 best bets, and one of them is Gelino Bello at 11-1. Would you believe that? I agree completely with your case on this occasion, and I'm going to use another phrase I love using, but Manella Crooner has turned into a wise guy's horse. Like, what? Just, this horse doesn't really travel. His jumping's scruffy, and yet everyone loves him. And I don't know, like, he could easily be the winner of this race, but I certainly wouldn't be taking 5-2 to test my theory, really. I think there's better bets in the race, and I think Gelino Bello's top of that list.
And let's then move on to our naps and our next bests for the Friday.
Yeah, well, my nap is Gelino Bello, and my next best, I've joint next bets because I'm backing 2 horses in the top. I'm backing 5-star Getaway at around 12-1 for Christian Williams, and I'm backing Snugsborough Hall at a huge price, 25-1 for Liam Cusack. He's also been ironed out for this race. He was 4th in it last year, behind Live, Love, Laugh. I think he could run a big race at a big price.
If those horses win, we're going to have a great Friday, because my nap of the Friday is 5-star Getaway in the Topham at 14-1 current best price. Look, he's won 3 times in the spring last year on good to soft, good and soft ground. All over 2.5 miles. He was a rapid improver, but the run I want to go back to is at Kempton on the 27th of December. The 4th horse in the race was Kitty's Light. 3rd was Phlegmatic, who was running off 124 that day. He's won twice since around Kempton. He's now rated £15 higher off 139. The 2nd was Fortescue, who was running off 137 that day. He's since won at Ascot. He's now rated £10 higher in 147. And I couldn't quite believe it. 5-star Getaway won that race off 130. He's only up £3 since. I would say this has been the plan for a long time, and Christian Williams proved it with Win My Wings, with Captain Nord. Kitty's Light's going to take the world of beating in the Whitbread at the end of the year, or the Bet365 Gold Cup. He's just a perfect target trainer, and 5-star Getaway I think can run a massive race. I'm on it big for Kitty's Light in the 365 Gold Cup. My next best is also Gelino Bello. I think he's going to take the world of beating, 11-1. Gelino Bello and 5-star Getaway, 14-1. Hopefully they can get the job done. Let's then focus on the Saturday, the Grand National Day, the big day, and the first Grade 1 is the 2.5 mile Mersey Novice Hurdle, won by my Drogo last year. I can't quite work out who's going to run.
Yeah, me neither, really. I think it all hinges on whether 3 Stripe Life runs or not. Don't know whether he will or not. If he does, I would back him. If he doesn't, it's a race I probably would want to have another look at, because I can't look past him, because I like the horse so much, and I really want him to have his Grade 1 in the sun, and I think this would be it if they do decide to run him. And to be honest, I haven't really looked deep enough into the rest of them, because I think 11-4, well, he won't be 11-4 if he's declared, let's just put it that way. He'll probably be a 6-4 shot.
Yeah, I completely agree. 3 Stripe Life, if he runs, will take the world of beating. One that I would give a quick mention to, and actually a horse that's going forward, is a Dan Skelton trained horse called Lac de Constance, who won at Warwick, defying a penalty after winning a listed race over 2 miles at Exeter. He's 25-1 for the 2.5 mile race, and he's 33-1 for the 2 mile Grade 1 novice. He's also in one of the handicaps. If he runs in either of these, I will have a small saver on him. I think that he could be a decent each way shout at a big price, and I actually think he's a proper horse going forward, especially over a fence. The next Grade 1 is the 2 miles novice chase. This is a penalty kick for Edwardstone.
Yeah, it's a complete no bet race. I think he does win. I don't like the Mullins horse in this at all. Gentleman to me, doesn't do it for me whatsoever. Horse that couldn't beat Hoton Calor in his beginner's chase at Leopardstown. He's won a few soft races since. He's got to go and prove it. Now, he might do it, but if Edwardstone would have to be on a non-going day, I think he'll take the world of beating.
I agree, but I do look at his price at 4-7, and I don't think it screams a lot of value. I know he won the Arkle, but I do think it's a weak race. The 3 mile Liverpool hurdle is the race before the Grand National, the Grade 1, and we've got Florent Porter, who looks likely to run here. We've got Champ, we've got Time Hill in there as well. All the main protagonists that ran in the Stayers hurdle at Cheltenham. I personally think Champ and Time Hill will reverse the form with Florent Porter, because I just think he's had a hard enough season. He's going to have to win it in a different way, is what I'm trying to say, because they're not going to let him have a freebie out in front. One of them will take him on early, and if he's passed, I can see him sulking. I would just about say Champ's more of a stayer and will suit Aintree because he was so impressive in the Sefton a good few years ago.
Yeah, hard to know. Neither of them are natural horses to really go up with the pace, though. And I looked through this race again, and you see nothing that's really going to worry him pace-wise up front. And I think for Florent Porter, the key is to probably go and head him after 2 furlongs of the race, and that would really upset him. I just think with a wide straight at Aintree as well, if a horse like Champ takes him on early in the straight, going to 3 out, I think Florent Porter would go again on Champ, really. I can kind of see where you're getting at with Time Hill. Obviously, he's the type of horse that kind of gets a little bit outpaced and then stays very well. But I think Florent Porter held them very comfortably at Cheltenham, and if he's in that same form, he'd have a big chance. I would love to see Noel Meade run the Devil's Coachman. I think he's been crying out for this sort of step up in trip for a while. He won the Boyne hurdle, didn't go to Cheltenham, but Ashdale Bob ran a huge race off near on top weight in the Coral Cup. He might be one to just be interested in for maybe next year. He might develop into a Stayers hurdle horse next year if he shows that he can stay at this trip. I think they're going to keep hurdling with him. He's 8-1, probably not a betting proposition, but just one to keep an eye on. But I think the favourite's pretty solid, and if Danny Mullins is doing Danny Mullins things, nothing will get by him.
And then we come to the feature, the 4 miles and 2 extended 4 miles and 2 Aintree Grand National Handicap Chase, the biggest race of the whole calendar year in the world of jumps racing. You can have 3 darts at this. Which 3 horses do you fancy?
Well, I've got a short list of 3, so that's worked out pretty conveniently. 2 near enough the top of the betting, so I'm not really telling anything they don't know. I've tried to get away from them for quite a while in this race, but I just keep looking at any second now, and I just think he's staring at us, you know, with a hole in our head, really. I think Ted Walsh is such a dab hand with these handicap chasers. He's probably JP's number 1 in the race. Mark Walsh is going to ride him. Desperately unlucky last year. He's 8-1. It's still not a bad price. Like, he's 8-1 and Snow Leopardess is 8-1. Now, what world are people backing Snow Leopardess ahead of any second now when they're both the same odds is beyond me, but that's for another day. Second one is JP's most likely number 2, Enjoy Dallin, for Kieran Murphy. I think he's got a lovely profile. He's got the right type of races in the locker. 3rd in the Irish National, 3rd in the Paddy Power at Christmas as well. He's only been raised a couple of pounds by the English handicapper and won at a big price, just as much as eggs are eggs, and you putting up Paul Nicholls horses around Aintree. I think if they can get Discorama to settle that a little bit better than last year, he's had his prep run this time round. He's off 148, a pound lower than last year where he was a very creditable 7th. You'll get 6 or 7 places with most bookies. He's 33-1. I'm not saying he's going to win because he usually shirks winning, but he's the type of horse that could be one of your horses that could fill the frame at a massive price in 4th or 5th.
Unlike you, I'm going to let you have your opinion and not button every single time you disagree with it. The 3
There's
horses
only
I'm
been
going to...
one Paul Nolan horse, that's why.
Perfect example, there you go. The 3 horses that I quite fancy for the National. Look, I don't fancy anything strong. I really don't. It's not like previous years. I liked Tiger Roll the first year that he won it. I liked him the second year as well. And there isn't one of those that stands out for me, and I'm going to take a wild swipe with 3. The first being Cloth Cap at 25-1. I think they've probably had this race in mind, whether he was quite progressive last year, 25 to 1. He was 6 to 1 for the race last year. Might represent a bit of value. The other one I like is Noble Yates at 50 to 1. They bought this horse to be a Grand National horse. I think he ran well at Cheltenham without being spectacular. And then one at a stonking price for Sandy Thompson is Dingo Dollar at 66 to 1. Purely because he's just one of those horses that runs well in staying handicaps, and he's 66 to 1. Dingo Dollar, Noble Yates, and Cloth Cap are my three. But look, it's an absolute lottery. If you're a first-time viewer because you fancy a bet in the National, pick one of the names that you like. Our naps and next bests on Grand National Day. Do you have two?
Yeah, well, my next best is probably any second now. I know he's 8 to 1. He's no great price for the National. I just can't get away from him at the moment. But my nap comes in the 3 mile handicap chase, the race before the National. There's an awful lot of talk about Sham Blue for this race, and he's been jocked up, and he could be an absolute good thing off 148. I'm not denying that. But I think Espoir de Rame in this race at 14 to 1 is just a mad price. I know he's off a high mark of 155, but we've seen with Kim Bailey before, with the likes of Vindication, Happy Go Lucky in years gone by, he can win these handicaps with horses off big weights. This horse was going to beat Chantry House, I think, at last year's Aintree meeting. He's been a little bit disappointing this year. He was poor enough in the Colin Parker, and then he went around Kelso around 2 weeks before Cheltenham on Moor Battle Day. He blew up in the straight, got beaten 4 lengths. I thought it was a decent enough effort. He was coming back at the line. I think a 3 mile handicap chase around Aintree in a race that Kim Bailey's done very well in before. He likes the track, he'll like the ground, he does have top weight, but off 155 he could be good enough, and I think they thought at the start of the year he'd be a grade 1 horse, and if that was the case he'd take some beating in this, and 14 to 1 I think is a huge price.
My next best is Henry II in the bumper. Just absolutely love this horse. I think he's going to be top class next year over a hurdle. Love the way he went about things in his Chepstow bumper. And then he backed that up at Ascot, beating Authorised Speed, Top Dog. Form really stacks up, especially with bumper horses this side of the water. Maybe Aintree on quick ground wouldn't be right up his street, but I think he's top class, and it wouldn't surprise me what the plan for him is to follow the Brave Man's Game routes, the Stage Star route, and go for the Challow Hurdle. So I'd imagine you'll see him a couple of times before, maybe at Chepstow, maybe at Newbury, and then he'll go that route. So I think he's a Grade 1 novice hurdler next year regardless, and I'm hoping that he can be a Grade 1 horse here as well. And then my nap, actually, funny enough, in the same handicap chase, a 3 mile 1 furlong race, it's T Clipper at 10 to 1. I think he's been running extremely well all season. I think he'll get his day, and I think he'll suit Aintree. So T Clipper at 10 to 1 each way, I think represents very good value. And we do have a couple of questions quickly. The first one is from MPK. He asks, what are your thoughts on the negativity towards trainers and owners having 5 or plus runners in the Grand National?
Yeah, well, I think you put it very well on Twitter earlier today, Josh, really. I think it's a bit of a non-story, if I'm being brutally honest. I think if a lot of people were looking at themselves in the eye, I don't think it would be happening if it wasn't for the fact that people still have a little bit of a grudge against Gordon, and I think people just have it in for Michael O'Leary, and I can understand because he plays the pantomime villain and the whole Tiger Rolls situation, but you know, at the end of the day, I wouldn't run Tiger Roll as a 12-year-old in the National, personally speaking. I think he's got horses. You know, he owns these horses just as much as any owner owns any horses. Just because they're good and they're in the top 40, you know, weighted horses for the National, crack on. Like, if I had all the money in the world and I had all these great horses and I liked the Grand National as a race, I'd run 6 or 7 in that. And you know, if it was Sam Crow, he's got Death Duty now in off bottom weight. People are banging on about the likes of these horses. Death Duty won a Grand National trial at Punchestown, came 6th in the Ultimate when he was outpaced. He's got a live chance at a big price. And we've seen before with Gigginstown, Rule the World won a National, having not won a single race over fences. So I just don't buy it. I don't buy this whole, you know, you've got to kind of step aside and let the small man in. I understand it's great to have small trainer, small owner stories. I get that. But at the same stage, the Grand National's the 40 best horses that want to go for the National. And, if you're in that, you're in it, and you're more than entitled to run in it. And if you're not in it, it's a shame, but tough.
I completely agree, and I said on Twitter, I said the Grand National isn't a charity. You don't just give away Grand National runs. It's an achievement in itself to own a horse, to train a horse that's good enough to compete in a Grand National. I was lucky enough to go down to Ben Pauling's a couple of years ago, and he was desperately trying to get Lebroy qualified for the National. He was always on the cuff, kind of the low 140s mark, the high 130s, and desperately trying anything he could to nick a couple of pounds, finish second, or win a race to get him qualified for the National, because it is such a big, prestigious event, and he never got to do it. But Ben Pauling doesn't go, oh, Gordon Elliott shouldn't have 6 runners in it because we wanted to run Lebroy. He was just trying extremely hard to get that run, and if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. From an owner's perspective, I look at Darren Yates, and I don't agree with how he spent his money on horses, because it's been absolutely bonkers. But he bought Black Lion for 300 grand, more than 300 grand, and he bought Don Poli for 170, because he wanted 2 horses to run in the Grand National. Black Lion didn't run, Don Poli did. But if you look at that, that's 470 grand minimum he spent to have 2 darts at the Grand National. That's what it means to him. That's what he values the Grand National to be. I don't think that you should cap any owner, because let's say me and Andrew clubbed together and we bought 20 horses with the idea of having 20, we want 20 Grand National horses. That is the plan. Let's say 6 of them were good enough and made it to a Grand National, all on the same year. And let's say they were the 6 highest rated horses that were entered for the race. So we have the 6 best 4-mile staying chasers in training. You're telling us that it wouldn't take away from the event if we only ran 3, if there wasn't much between them. It's absolute nonsense in my eyes. These owners and these trainers, Jigginstown, as much as you might not like them, or you might not like Gordon Elliott, or you might think that JP McManus is greedy with how many runners he has in these handicaps, they're not buying 20 horses, they're buying 100 horses a year. They're buying ridiculous amounts, especially JP. They're pumping millions and millions and millions into the sport, and the sport, with all due respect, would be absolutely on its arse without the likes of JP McManus supporting them. So I can't see for a reason why JP shouldn't have 5 or 6, if he's got 5 or 6 worthy candidates, as I would class a worthy candidate, a horse that can qualify for the race. And it's always a great story when a trainer has won, but you cannot take away from when trainers or owners have multiple. I just think it's a complete non-story.
Yeah, I'm reiterating pretty much everything you're saying. I don't think even, the likes of your Ben Paulings, are really the one that's probably going to get hit this year is Emma Lavelle with Claire Surf, who's more than likely not going to end up getting in. Like, these trainers don't want a pity party at the same stage. Like, these are, good trainers with good horses. And like, Claire Surf's a young horse. He can go back, he can win a race next year, and he'll qualify for the National, no worries. It's just one of these things. If it wasn't for JP McManus, and I'm not one of the great JP McManus fans, but there'd be 15, 20 trainers in Ireland that would be out of business without JP, who keeps pumping horses into yards and keeps, paying the bills and doing everything right. And yeah, of course, he lands a few punts. Yeah, sometimes his horses don't run the most honest you'll ever see, but at the end of the day, that's a bit of racing, and you've kind of got to take the rough with the smooth. And as I say, it doesn't really happen as much when JP's got 6 horses, and it just seems that everyone's got a little bit of a bee in their bonnet about Gordon and Michael O'Leary, potentially about the Tiger Road Delta work incident at Cheltenham, maybe even about last year, obviously, with Gordon as well. But I don't know. As you say, if I had the horses, I'd run them.
Put it into perspective, last year, you're spot on. JP McManus had 6 runners, 5 of whom had ran very well over 3 miles or 1 furlong plus. So they were proper stayers. The one that had never ran over further than 3 miles was Minella Times, who won the Grand National. So you can't... I see these people on social media saying that, why are they running Sam Crow? He definitely won't stay. But you can't say that. That's your opinion. And look, if that's your opinion, I'm not criticising it. But in Gordon Elliott's opinion and in Jigginstown's opinion, he will stay. That's all we've got time for on this episode of Let's Talk Racing. If you did enjoy it, please hit that like button. It massively helps out the channel. And we'll see you soon.